Welcome, everybody, to episode 8 of the NARAD podcast for 2023. Today, we're going to concentrate on down payment assistance. And what does that mean, and what does that look like to you as the community and potential home buyers to take advantage of that in 2024? I am Henry Rucker, the Associate Director for Project for Pride in Living. And I'm going to start with asking Donnie to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Donnie Brown, and I am the Diversity and Sustainability Director with Minnesota Realtors.
Ryan?
I'm Ryan Nestigen. I'm the Senior Project Coordinator in City of Minneapolis for the Residential Real Estate and Economic Development Department. I handle homebuyer access and down payment assistance programs.
Okay, then we'll go with you, Damon.
And my name is Damon Mason. I'm the Senior Housing Program Manager for Rondo Community Land Trust. We cover St. Paul and all of suburban Ramsey County.
All right, well, welcome, everybody. We got an exciting topic today. We're going to talk about down payment assistance, and we know there's going to be a flood of money coming to the community in 2024 and 2025. I'm going to start with you, Ryan. Kind of give people a little bit more history about what you do at the city of Minneapolis and what does down payment assistance mean for the city of Minneapolis?
So I've been with the city for about 4 years now, and I was given the responsibility to oversee the down payment assistance programs called Homeownership Opportunity Minneapolis through the city. But before I go into that, I'll talk about down payment assistance. So first, what is down payment is the big question for a lot of people. And what down payment is the remaining amount that's required to close the transaction between the purchase price, the title, like all the closing costs, and the first mortgage, the amount remaining. And then what down payment assistance is that it helps. It's looking to close the gap for to close the transaction for the home buyer to basically lower or eliminate the cash to close for a home buyer.
Okay. So I want to make sure we all understand this. So when you buy a house, you're going to have to put down money for your down payment.
Yes.
That's also part of your earnest money. Typically, if you're going to buy a house for $300,000 and you put down 3%, that's $9,000. Part of that could be $1,000 or $2,000 for earnest money, but that is part of your down payment. So Donnie, kind of going into what have you been working on and what has your association been working on over the last year and a half, 2 years that is really relevant for people listening to this conversation today as far as helping them get into homes in the future?
Well, just recently, the Minnesota Realtors, along with the Homeownership Center and Habitat, did a coalition together and went to the state legislature and asked for funding for down payment assistance. And so with that conversation and some community group sessions that were had, came up that the barrier really was down payment assistance. And so we've implemented the first generation down payment assistance program, which will be implemented and funds will be accessible in the beginning of 2024.
Okay, that's excellent. That we're going to help people. You just said a key word there. You said first gen. To my understanding, first generation means that your parents or grandparents have not owned a home, and you'd be the first person in your family to be a homeowner, based in the last 2 generations, because we can't really go back further than that. Maybe is that kind of what that means for the listener today?
So it's anyone that has not owned a home, or maybe they lost their home due to foreclosure, or their parents have lost their house during the foreclosure period. So it's anyone that has never owned a home, first generation, and may have lost their home. So them are their parents as well. So will qualify.
That's key, because I do know, unfortunately, we know some people that probably did lose their homes to foreclosure and maybe the mortgage crisis. Maybe even mom and dad lost their house when they were children, that maybe made that child afraid to buy a house. That's excellent news to have. Damon, kind of tell us what you guys do at Rondo and what might be different from what Ryan and Donnie talked about as far as down payment assistance.
Perfect. Yes. So Rondo Community Land Trust, I will leave some things that I want people to educate them about, where they can look it up, what is actually a land trust, right? So, and they could deep dive into that, but it's a shared equity situation. And what we offer is gap fund. So it's not down payment assistance. It's more, it is gap fund. So short example is that, we have small approval from the lender. So you go apply for a mortgage due to student loans, what have you, depending on your debt load. And you're pre-approved for $125,000, let's say. Well, clearly we know you can't buy a home for $125,000, maybe the garage, but definitely not the house. So what we do is we give you grant funds up to $125,000, which increases your buying power. So you still have a $125,000 mortgage, but you got the buying power of $250,000. So you do the math. So we're going to work our way backwards. If you happen to be pre-approved for $200,000. If we tack on our 125,000, your buying power is now 325, but you got a $200,000 mortgage payment, which is beautiful, right? Because it's a shared equity situation. And then to boot, we give up to $50,000 after you successfully close. With the Rondo Community Land Trust home, we give you $50,000 for improvements to the home. So these things could be windows, it could be replacing the roof, anything with the foundation, electrical, plumbing. We give up to $50,000 to make those improvements. Those are also grant funds, gap funds. So none of those dollars do you ever pay back.
So I heard a key thing there when you said that your approval amount was $200,000, and then you can put your money on top for the gap assistance. I do think a lot of times that we have a lot of buyers that don't really understand what their approval amount is, right? A lot of times we hear sales price, sales price, sales price. So if I'm buying a house, let's say in Minneapolis, how much could I maybe qualify for down payment assistance to help me with that down payment, that $9,000 if I'm buying some for $300,000?
Well, in the city, Minneapolis, we have a down payment assistance program was called Homeownership in Minneapolis, which I spoke about earlier. Now it's called Minneapolis Homes Access. And what's available right now is up to $20,000 in down payment assistance, which is secured with a 0% 30-year deferred mortgage.
Okay, so what I heard you say, I can get money that's deferred. I make no 0%. I make no payment on it. Let me ask you guys this: why do you think more people don't take access or use the down payment programs that are out there? Right. I think it's one of the myths that we also have. I need 20% down, right? Or I don't qualify for that. What would you like to say to the listener today of why they still want to work with a local nonprofit or lender or contact somebody at the association or city of Minneapolis to figure out, well, maybe I actually can qualify for down payment assistance? Damon, what do you see, even at Rondo, why people don't believe they qualify?
Well, I'm glad that you attack that question because I'm going to be very transparent as always. A lot of times it all depends on the community in which you serve. Whenever you're dealing in the Black and brown community, the first thing we think that there's a catch and we think it's predatory. So the only component that's missing is just to go back, do your homework, and see what works for you because it's working for everybody else who may not look like you. And so we then, have to go back and have the conversation as I told you that this was available. I told you this is a powerful mechanism for you to achieve home ownership. And so I'll say it in that regard. Everybody else is buying. Why are you not buying? And we are out here. We're hosting constantly. We're educating constantly. Stay off of social media. Caller, are you there? Stay off of social media. Call a professional at a nonprofit. Call your realtor. They know about these programs and, achieve home ownership.
So, Donnie, I'm going to bring that to you. How could we do better with maybe even getting more information to the realtor network so they really understand that, hey, it's not a negative if your buyer is going to take advantage of some of this down payment money out there, because it actually could put more money in your pocket as a real estate professional, because that may allow you to get more buyers into homes.
I think one of the things, as Damon alluded to, is education. So we need to get that information to our realtors. The realtors then need to educate their buyers. And then we need, as a collective, as a community, provide the information. It has to be easy to access information, right? All of our partners' website, we should have links to down payment assistance programs or to the sites, or a link to the sites that get us to the information, right? And then we need to do a better job just educating the realtors, all realtors, what funds are available.
Yeah.
And so the more that we can communicate and also infiltrate systems sometimes to put that information there. As they say, you have to put it where the goats can get it. So it has to be easy and it has to be accessible. Although Damon says don't put it on social, I put it on social.
What I do, so I think that ties into your network, right? So you know how to get people to the right place. Damon knows how to get people to the right place. Ryan knows how to get people to the right place. So I do believe, I think it needs to be all over. Because then I jump into, well, Ryan, why did the city of Minneapolis decide to say we're going to give money for down payment assistance? Because to my understanding, Minnesota has one of the largest disparity gaps in the United States of America. Is that kind of why the city jumped into this pool?
Yeah, I mean one of our main project goals under Minneapolis Homes, which is an umbrella program that does development assistance and home improvement for current homeowners and down payment assistance, is to reduce racial disparities in home ownership.
Okay.
And that's specifically for our funding to lower that. Because I think we did a study that I think it was 75% of BIPOC renters are 80% or below area median income for the city, and so we want to reduce that number.
Okay. I want to throw this out there too, because I do think this is a myth. And we all can speak about this, is that you have to be poor to qualify for down payment assistance. And I'm amazed with the number of people that we work with at PPL that says, oh, I make $70,000, I don't qualify. And I'm like, you're not even close to some of the down payment program guidelines, right? But in their mind, they think they're over. So how can we do a better job as industry professionals? But again, why do you think people, as you kind of mentioned earlier, Damon, people are a little bit scared, but I'm not sure what you're scared of. If I can get you money to help you get into a house that creates long-term wealth for you and your family to pass on generational wealth, and as Ryan mentioned, 0% interest. I believe First Gen is also going to be 0% interest given over a certain period of time. Why
5
are
years.
people not taking advantage of this money and thinking they make too much money? It's like going to the doctor before you get your diagnosis.
And you're brilliant. So let's talk about this. I'm gonna add a little bit of clarity because that's going to be needed, because I know some listeners are out there today saying, he says stay off social media. Mostly everything that's on social media is all the negative naysayers. Unfortunately, challenge me on this, that Black and brown people are the one to get the bad information. Sorry, do your due diligence. Look at what's coming down our feed. As soon as we like a post that might be comical, guess what we're getting? All comical feed. When we turn around and we start entertaining anything outside of what other people are entertaining that has to do with housing, they're getting all the housing content. It's hard. It's hard to process a content on social media. It's a very difficult thing. However, like Donnie said, we do need social media to, put product out, information out, because that's how the world works. However, what I mean by stay off of social media, the junk. Please go on there when you're about business. Don't listen to what your sister's brother, auntie's friend said that lived 13 houses down that never owned a home.
Right.
Or owned a home and lost it, and they're upset respectfully. But also, when you start a journey, don't start the journey on social media. That's all I'm saying. As far as getting the information to make a decision, call the nonprofit, call your realtor, say, hey, let's get through this information, because you're going to get hit with everything as soon as you tell somebody that you're interested in homeownership. So you don't know if it's for you, because they're telling you on social media the negative Nellies are saying you don't qualify. Oh, they'll never give you that. I applied, I didn't get it. So now it's making my job harder. It's making your job harder as a nonprofit. It's making Donnie's job as a realtor hard. I mean, everybody is harder. We got to figure out a way to streamline the conversation and go against all the negative narratives that's actually a part of social media when you're trying to achieve homeownership.
And to piggyback off that, homebuyer education and homebuyer counseling is pivotal, because those are the resources to plug PPL there. Like, that's the resource, not take away from realtors, but that's like, they are the knowledge source.
Well, it's interesting you said it, because this is, again, you can't get no realer than this. We had a transaction recently, was going to get some money from the city of Minneapolis. There was a misunderstanding between the lender and the administrator of the down payment funds, we got it fixed, right?
Mhm.
But I truly believe this is, again, if PPO might not have been involved in that transaction, the buyer may walk away because they get frustrated. I appreciate everything Donnie's doing. I to this day, I give Donnie kudos. I would not probably be as involved with the Minneapolis Association of Realtors if Donnie wasn't there at that time, because I didn't understand the platform. I didn't understand what needed to be done behind scenes to help more people learn. But I go back to, it's almost like what you about calling a nonprofit. Why are we afraid to ask for help? Right? Because we keep saying we want generational wealth, but then if you don't have somebody that can show you the path to the generational wealth, that's one of the barriers. I think in the Black community, we have to stop allowing other people to say what we can and cannot do. Because I go back to this. There's a huge myth of how much money you need for down payment assistance. There's a huge myth of how much money you actually need to make, what your credit score is. Every lender offers different products. The association does a good job of making sure we take CE, continuing education credits, right? Now some of it is mandatory about working with diverse communities. Why do you think that came about, Donnie?
I think one of the things is, that I've been working in this field for a very long time, over 20 years. And, and we just got our first African American president, 2 years ago, of a 135-year history, right?
Mhm.
And so when we're looking for how do we be on the path to move forward, it's really about access to information. And so if we don't see people in our spaces that look like us or whatever, we're trusted advisors. So if you're a trusted advisor, who are you trusting? If I'm looking or even thinking about buying a house, who's there for me to trust to get that information from? And I think back to Damon, we need to do more as far as outreach,
Mhm.
getting an information. It can be comical
Mhm.
to say, okay, I brought a home and so did you. So can you, right? And I think we've had such a hard time. It's just saying, how do we promote and depict people of color, professionals, and homeowners in Minnesota to say that they can buy a home? I had one person that talked to me about buying a home, and I wasn't interested. My mom owned a home, my father owned a home, and I just wasn't interested until they said one thing that struck me. And I was trying to move out of Minnesota. She said, why are you trying to leave Minnesota? Why not invest in buying a house so that when you leave, it's an investment and you can take that equity with you? Well, guess what? I'm 27 plus years still here, right? Living in a home or whatever. But if you had just had that conversation, because I was raised in home ownership, that it really wasn't a big thing. I was living in a duplex that my uncle owned here in Minnesota. So I didn't really have the need, right? But then when she struck the nerve to say, invest,
Mhm.
equity, take it with you,
Yeah.
that's when I began that opened up my eyes, and I was like, okay, I can do that. And it was just that simple. So it's different conversations. So sometimes we pigeonhole people into low income conversations. You can't do this. There are Fortune 500 companies here in Minnesota, and they have affinity groups that we need to be talking to about staying here in Minnesota, owning while you're here before they transition to another state. So there's different conversations to be had, and we have to broaden our conversations to include more people. It's not just low income, it's all persons of color that can actually own a house here in Minnesota, and it's beneficial. So
Right.
I want to jump in. That was brilliant. I couldn't have said that any better. Donnie said something triggered her. And I want to touch on that and throw it back to you, Henry, is that's the thing. Are we bringing information to the scene that's triggering Black and brown folks? Now, we got a lot of negative triggers.
Mhm.
You can't.
Yeah.
You're going to lose it.
Yeah.
You can't afford it.
never had it.
I never had it. How you don't know how to manage a property. Why you buy. See all that trigger language?
So let me ask you this. So when we talk about that, because I'm gonna go back to the city of Minneapolis, and we're gonna keep going down this path. Because one thing I want us to also do is stop being afraid to live among each other, right? So people that know me, I don't believe in hoods. We live in neighborhoods.
That's
right?
correct.
So you have a lot of people that will actually physically rent in Minneapolis and been there for 20 years, but they won't buy in Minneapolis because there's supposedly a negative part about maybe where they live.
Right.
But I believe we create a community. So I'll ask you guys this. So how do we change those triggers to be more positive about, yep, I want to live here. I want to live here. And I'm living here because I'm next to the park. I'm close to the light rail. How do we change that narrative of how we as Black people look at the community?
I think one of the things is our first home is not our forever home.
Say that again.
Right.
Our
Come on.
first home
Mhm.
is not our forever home.
Mhm.
The home that I live in, this is house number 3, is still not my forever home,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so once I was able to capture that and just say, let me buy first a home that establishes me in the community. I'm working with my neighbors. My kid is going to the school down the street that I may have gone to or that my family has gone to. They can go to their nieces and my nieces and nephews or whoever's in the community, and sister down the street can make sure that my kid get home,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So when we're and again, we have been taught in order to buy a home, we need to be in the suburbs.
Mhm.
Mhm.
A lot of the amenities that you need to get your kids from school to school sometimes it's right there in the city,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And so now, can we have more amenities? Of course. But if you look at Minnesota's landscape, especially North Minneapolis, you have your parks, your recs,
Mhm.
your bus transportation, you have schools, and you have access to the highway corridors. You can get wherever you need to be within 15 minutes.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Let's just really jump this off what we're really trying to say so we're clear to the listener. It's amazing that people want to downplay, North Minneapolis always so bad. They have these shootings and then the shootings stop once we out of there.
Right.
Look at what's next to North Minneapolis. Everything under the sun, Target Field, a US Bank Stadium, a 5-minute car ride, but if you're on a bus, 10, 12 minutes, this is the thing. It's always bad and less preferred
Mhm.
when it's black and brown people there until they get us out.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, oh my God, we were on prime real estate. That's how you know you should make an impact in that community. That's how you should know that you should buy in that community. Because if they're talking about it like that, look at other neighborhoods.
Mhm.
If they could not get us out of there, if they couldn't downplay it enough, they'll send a highway through it.
Okay, so touch on Rondo without. Go ahead, Donnie.
And I was going to touch on Rondo.
Yeah.
So one of the things that my family is from St. Paul. I have an aunt that lives in the house. She's been there for 50 plus years. And so they were one of the original Rondo residents or whatever. At the time, they probably was one of the first blacks
Mhm.
in that community. And now they're the last one on that block.
Mm.
And so brought the house for, I think it was 16 or 18,000, which is now worth over 600,000 easily. And that house is in pristine condition.
Mhm.
It looks like it's magazine ready. So whenever she's ready to transition out, there's very little work that they need to do on that home because they kept it in such pristine community. But we're talking about as people have left Rondo, look how much equity they've lost as well.
Mhm.
So we're saying you can buy a home and own a home wherever you want in
Right.
Minneapolis, not just North, not just Rondo, whatever community you want to live in, it should be accessible. And then there's funds to help you do that. So the first generation is actually 10% of 320. So the max you can get is 32,000.
But let's say I buy some for $350, you're still going to give me 32,000, which is almost 10%. Okay, go ahead.
And that is a forgivable loan over 5 years.
And,
Okay.
and it can be layered with our program.
So you could do first gen, you could do city of Minneapolis, you could buy in Minneapolis, you could do first gen, buy in Rondo. Is that still?
Yep, you can do. Yep. So we have first generation that applies to us. We have inheritance that applies to us. We have a right to return to Rondo that applies to us. We have Minnesota housing that can apply to us. I'm talking about you can stack this thing up 5 times
Mhm.
and buy affordable, like live better than most of us in a traditional open market.
Mhm.
But you have to take the steps to talk to us and have the conversation and say what's really available.
Right.
And so that's the conversation. That's why we're here today.
Some are still some from the HOA, the Homeownership Opportunity Alliance little campaign we have. Get ready, be ready.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the things where we as renters, especially the black community, we're not always ready. So again, I'm not making excuses for anybody because rates were super low for the last 4 or 5 years.
Damn.
You didn't take advantage of it. Now you're going to get down payment money that might be forgiven Ryan's money is 0% for 30 years, but you pay that back if you sell the property.
Yep.
But let's just say hypothetically, I'm gonna give you a scenario. Somebody buys a house for $300,000. They can get $30,000 from First Gen. They buy in the city of Minneapolis. They can maybe get 10 or 20,000 of your money, Ryan.
Yep.
They lived there for 10 years. That 30,000 they got from First Gen is they don't longer owe that. They would owe your money back. But let's say they had to pay it back, right?
Well,
But they're still gonna be in a better position financially selling the property in 10 years than renting in 10 years. Because the last time I checked, if you're not paying your own mortgage, you're paying somebody else's mortgage.
right. Well,
Go ahead, tell me,
I was
Ryan.
gonna say that 10-year example that you're telling me. Our program has changed. That now after 10 years, you actually can rent out the property and not trigger any sort of repayment.
Really?
Yes. So
Okay.
that was a program change. We did that this last month, and City Council has approved it, where it's a 10-year occupancy requirement. After 10 years, you can rent it.
Because I think Donnie hit on something that we've been talking about at PPL. There are a lot of Fortune 500 companies here. And I tell people, one of my best friends that really got himself doing well, he worked at General Mills, bought a duplex in North Minneapolis. He now lives in Chicago, but he's never sold his duplex. When he was a young professional working for General Mills, that's now his basic kind of college funds for his daughter if he ever sells it. But I don't believe people realize that you can keep the property, but also how impactful it can be that when you're a young professional, you're always going to be better off buying than renting, right? Because Donnie, you said this is house 3 for you. Even if you bought a house and you said, hey, I'm only going to live here for 5 years, you rather have a house for 5 years versus paying somebody else's rent. But what if that 5 turns into 10? Well, now you're in a better financial position. So again, how do we get people to understand it's okay that it's not going to be your forever home? That to just buy a house first.
And not only that, after that 5 years or whatever, it's an investment, right? And I'd be missed if we didn't talk about generational or legacy, living a legacy for our kids, right? And I think as the supply chains tightens up and less homes are available and affordability isn't available, one of the things that we need to do as we get older and have our kids is start to buy investment property that they can have moving forward, right? And so if we can at least begin to buy properties for our kids as an investment, because we don't know if what's going to be available later. We need more homes to be built here. We need more homes to be built at an affordable rate so that people can actually access it. And so as we are continue to have these conversations, we have to talk about wealth creation. I just came from the NAR conference, the National Association of Realtors conference. 2 things that they talked about. One is heirs. There's an heirs policy. I can't remember the complete title of it, but it was talking about heirs and on farm land and those kinds of things from the South. And there was a great movie that they shared called Gaining Grounds, which was really good. That which should be coming out. Just recently, I saw a movie that's called Shame on Chicago. That's another one that's going to be a 5-part series that will be coming out probably in April. If we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it, right? And so if we can look at ways to secure homes, secure the land, right? That's the most important thing. I think 3 things that my grandfather told me growing up: own your house, get your education, and have an insurance policy. And so sometimes life's lessons has to be that simple.
Land holds political and economic power. And if you don't own it, your voice is lost. My boss says this so gracefully. And this is why we do what we do. This is why we say what we say. Because if you don't hear it, the trigger won't go off.
Right.
Then we're going to continue down the same road of thinking that we can't own or that this won't work for us. We already talked about projections. Like if you start now and all of a sudden you end up being here for another 100 years like Donnie. She thought she was supposed to be gone, living her best life in Hawaii somewhere. She's still sitting here doing the good work.
Right.
But guess what she did? She's in a positive equity situation. She's building wealth.
Right.
So this is a beautiful example, and she is that example.
But it's interesting. I don't think people really even understand how fast a year goes, right? Because I do think it's like, yeah, I got a 5-year plan. With that 5-year plan turns into a 10-year plan, and the next it's 15-year. So we know there's going to be a lot of money in 2024, 2025. what are the requirements? So, like, give me an example. What are some of your requirements, Damon, for your program? What are some of the requirements for your program, Ryan? And so people can really understand that they are different for everybody, but they should still inquire with a nonprofit in the network. Naturally, I'm going to say you come to PPL, you go to PPL, you go to Model Cities, you go to PRG, you go to Urban League, you go to Clues. You can go to all these different organizations that work with first-time home buyers. But why would somebody say, hey, I want to look at Rondo? Why would somebody want to look at City of Minneapolis? Because there is so many down payment programs. But then if they don't qualify for your program at Rondo, they don't qualify maybe for City of Minneapolis, what do we do with that participant at that time?
Oh, I was gonna say, well, I mean, our program, we have two programs, arguably. We have our Minneapolis Homes Access, which is our down payment assistance program for any home the home has to be within the city limits of Minneapolis. And you have to be at or below 80% area median income is the main requirement. And we just changed it now that starting program changes that are approved for next year are going to be, you have to be a first time home buyer. And we have our other one, which is our Minneapolis Homes affordability assistance program, which is that you can purchase a home, any home that was developed under a Minneapolis Homes Development Program. And those homes you have to be at or below 80% area median income as well. And those homes are brand new construction homes within the city, mostly within North Minneapolis, but throughout all the city. So those are the two programs. The main door opener is 80% area median income, or at or below.
So let me ask one question, because sometimes I think people get confused, but I want to make sure that we're telling the community right. Traditionally, for a first-time home buyer, doesn't mean you've never bought a house. That just means you have not owned a home in the last 3 years.
Correct.
And that's going to be the same for the city of Minneapolis, correct?
Yep, correct.
Okay, so I want you guys to realize that if you owned a house in 2015, you sold it in 2019, and you have not owned a house in the last 3 years, you're considered a first-time home buyer again. So I want people to really understand that, because sometimes I think people don't believe that. They don't understand how the process works. They're like, I bought a house 15 years ago. Yep, but if you have not lived in a house in the last 3 years and you had no ownership in it, you're a first-time home buyer again. So, Damon, what do you guys do? Because we know Rondo's doing great work, but we can't help everybody that comes through Rondo. So what are we going to do for those participants that might be over income guidelines, or they might be a better fit somewhere else?
That's the beauty. It's called partners. And, if you're doing the good work, and let's say a potential buyer attends a Rondo orientation that we do biweekly. So what they'll do is we're 80% area median income. But let's say that person doesn't qualify, because that's the biggest thing. Maybe you make too much money, but often you don't. But if you do, it sounds like you're going to be on the open market. But even being on the open market also doesn't mean that you can't access all these beautiful down payment assistance programs that are available to you. Now there's a caveat. The caveat is get you a educated, smart realtor that actually does the work for you. The relationship with that lender that knows the products, that knows how to work with those products, other than just being opportunistic and saying, okay, are you approved? Let's go look at houses. And they're giving you something or putting you somewhere you don't belong. Then you're not going to have a great experience, right? So if you don't fit, I'm going to then say, hey, I know some lovely people on both sides of the fence. I think you ought to have a conversation with them. I think you'll be a perfect candidate for this, and I'll let them take it from there.
Right. So I'm going to tie back into what Donnie said earlier. In the 135-year history, 2 years ago, for Minneapolis Association of Realtors, we never had a Black president before. Denise Mouzon was that first Black president, so we want to give kudos to Denise. Denise works with all of us, does great work in the community. I'm also going to steal something from a very good friend of mine, Trent Bowman. It's never a hard no. It's a slow yes. I think a lot of times we have to get used to that mentality of, I may not have qualified today, but I may qualify in 6 months or a year from now. But you got to put the work in, right? We'll help you plant the seeds, but you got to be able to water the flowers to make sure they grow. In a parting, what is one thing that you guys would really want the community to take from today, but also just into the future? What's one thing you really want them to understand about what we're trying to do, not just as NARAB, but as all the people sitting here at this table in the community? What do you want them to understand is very important? I would say let's actually two things. What's important and why we do the work we do, but then what do you think they can gain from this podcast today?
I think my closing words would be, I want people to understand and to really get it into their head that there is a group a very, very large group of people. I'm just speaking Black and brown people at this moment, which is clearly the underserved community in the state of Minnesota. That there's a group of magnificent people of color that are on the ground waiting for you to just show up. I would love to show up for you, but I can't. I need you to show up. And then I'm going to support you, and we're going to support you every step of the way. And so every single day that you don't take that step, we're out there waiting for you to take that step. So we encourage you to do that. And it's such a huge thing. And again, land holds political and economic power. Your voice is heard when you have home ownership, when you own it. When you do not own it and you are a renter, you're going to be told how this is going to go. But when you're in a positive equity situation or you have rights to something, then your voice is amplified.
I'll say, all it takes is a conversation. I think in my point of view, like it starts with a conversation and it just builds from there. Because for a conversation with a nonprofit, that's a conversation that doesn't require credit. It might require credit, it might not. It's just where are you trying to go? And I think in that conversation can lead to other thing, which is resources. There is an immense amount of resources. First Generational, City of Minneapolis, Rondo. Our side, we have a land trust, City Lakes Community Land Trust. We work with them. There's resources there. There's resources all over the metro and greater Minnesota that is available to somebody. And all it takes is a conversation.
What would you like to add to that, Donnie?
I would say that home ownership is a wealth equalizer. Right? So we see from, our counterparts or whatever that they have great wealth because they were able to leave, their family was able to leave property to them. And so now they have access to whatever that equity could be or that facility or that property, right? And I think the biggest thing is, we're talking to Minneapolis and Rondo, but the first generation is actually Minnesota. I just talked to a young lady just recently, and she's in Siegel, and these funds could be applied there. There's homes there, right? And so we need to just get into home ownership. It is accessible.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think what I would want people to really take away from today is one, the number one way in America to create wealth is through home ownership. The second way is through life insurance, as you mentioned, Donnie. You should make sure you have that. But I would say to what Ryan, you can't be afraid to ask for help, right? And it's no judgment. The one thing I want people to realize today in the community, there's no judgment when you go to a nonprofit or you to contact anybody on the panel today, because it's really about educating. How do we put you with the right people to give you the right resources that then you can share the right information on Facebook, right? So then people would know, because I do believe we have a lot of tools and we're not making sure people know how to use the tools in the right way. They have the tools in their tool belt, but they don't know how to actually use all the tools in their tool belt.
There's not a stupid question.
I would agree with that 100%. That is it for us today here at the NARAD podcast on down payment assistance. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and please reach out to us if you have any questions. You can go to narabtc.com. Thank you. MBC. No relation to NBC.